Dean and Tyler Listle are registered investment advisor representatives. Investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services, LLC, and Secure Retirement Solutions, LLC are not affiliated companies.
It's time for Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. Now, here are your hosts, Dean and Tyler.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Tyler and I will discuss topics that affect your retirement, such as investments, income planning, Social Security, and much more. How are you this morning, Tyler?
Good morning, Dean. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good, thank you. Today we're going to talk about rollover options. You hear that a lot. You see a lot of signs on financial institutions, roll over your 401k here or something like that. Many times when people leave their employment or they lose their job, they'll talk about rolling over their 401k. A rollover is a process that people take their employer sponsored plan and they move it usually custodian to custodian. It moves from their current employment and where it's held to a different firm, typically converted to an IRA then at that particular point in time. But there are times when a rollover is good for you, and there are times where a rollover you might have to look at it because there are some drawbacks to it. So we're going to be talking about those particular things. And what we're going to do right now is we're just going to look at, a couple of the options when you roll over your money from your employer-sponsored plan. You don't always have to roll it over to another financial institution. Do understand, though, that when you do roll it over to another financial institution, it is a non-taxable event. So that's important to know. But Tyler, what are some of the other options that people can look at when they leave their employment? They don't necessarily always have to roll it over to an IRA, do they?
No, and Dean, we'll get into that right here. But we have a lot of clients who either they do to their financial plan based on their financial plan, they decide to retire, or maybe even they're terminated, or they just simply change jobs. At that point, they have money in their previous employer's retirement plan, and at times it can be pretty daunting and intimidating if they don't know all the different options that they're given, what they can do with their 401k, their hard-earned money that they put away within their employer retirement plan. They don't know what they can do at that time, but it can be quite simple once you understand what the different options are. So the first step here in talking about rolling over your 401k, your retirement plan, is going through the options and really finding out what they are first and foremost before you decide whether it might be better off to keep it where it's at or to roll it over. So with that said, when you leave an employer-sponsored retirement plan, so again, that's your 401k, 403b, 457 plan, profit sharing plan, whatever that might be, you can, number one, and this is probably the most common that we see, is roll the money into an individual retirement account, an IRA. That's the most common plan where you take that, you call your 401k custodian and say that you're no longer working there and you like to roll the money out into an IRA. And what happens then is, depending on whether it's a direct or an indirect rollover, that money goes from your 401k, they cut a check to you, and then you fund your IRA from there, and it's a non-taxable event as long as the funds are deposited within 60 days, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But number one option, roll the money into an IRA. Another option would be roll the money into the new employer's qualified plan if the new employer is willing to accept the funds, and that's part of their process and procedure. Now, that's if you change jobs or you're terminated and get a new job. Obviously, if you retire, you don't have that option because you're no longer working. But that's another option. If you quit your old job, go into a new job, they have a good 401k plan. They have low-cost funds that have a good track record of performance over time. It might be, and they also maybe offer a match. It might be in your best interest to take your old 401k and roll it over into your new one. But again, that depends on the company. Some 401k companies, they don't allow incoming rollovers. They might only allow a portion for whatever reason, but that all will depend on the new company that you work for. But that is the other option. Roll the money into your new employer's qualified plan if they allow. The third option with your 401k or retirement plan, if you leave your company, is to leave the money where it is in your former employer's plan if the plan permits. Oftentimes right now I see it with quite a few clients where if they change jobs and they leave their money in their old 401k, their old retirement plan, they might get a letter after a few months, after a few years saying if you don't move it, your funds will be shipped to an outside custodian IRA anyway. So a lot of times the company, they might want you to move it out. Some will permit that you can keep it there. And we'll get into these options later, but there are reasons to keep it. However, there are also reasons to roll it over. And typically, if you're no longer working there, your 401k shouldn't be left there either. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later in the show because there are reasons to keep it at your old employer.
Okay, and we're going to look, as Tyler said, we're going to talk about those 4 options. We're going to look at the last one first because that's the one we discourage the most, taking the money from your 401k when you retire or get released from a job. And part of the reason is the taxable situation could be ridiculous, okay? Also, depending on your age, you could get hit with another penalty from the IRS of 10% taking the money to age prior to 59 and a half. But, there's some examples, and again, depending on your tax bracket, based on your income, an example here is a $100,000 401k. If you were to cash that out and take the money, you could lose as much as 40% or $40,000 in the form of taxes and penalty if you're younger than 59 and a half. So we typically talk to clients and say, okay, are there other options to get cash in your hands at that particular time? Are you better suited for a home equity line of credit or a conventional loan? Another reason we discourage taking that money and cashing out a 401k is chances are you will never run into the ability to get a lump sum like that again to put away and invest for your retirement. And, unfortunately, it's very hard to borrow money for your retirement. You can borrow money for many other things, but just to go in there and say, I want to borrow money for my retirement, typically isn't a good thing to say if you're looking to borrow money. So Tyler, anything else that I might be missing when we talk about, taking the money, 10% IRS penalty if you're under 59 and a half years old, and the tax consequences could be huge?
Yeah, Dean, I've had this conversation with different people before, and they just really don't realize that. They say if I'm no longer employed here, can I take the money and just cash it out? Is there any repercussions to doing that? They think, every single penny in that 401k is theirs and they can keep it and they don't really plan for penalties or taxes. When in reality, it's highly discouraged to do that because the funds in your retirement accounts are generally funded with pre-tax dollars. So that means money that you put from your paycheck or payroll goes directly into your 401k without being taxed. So that means pre-tax. Then it grows tax deferred each and every year. So you don't get a 1099. You don't have to pay any taxes on the gains every single year. You only have to pay taxes once you take the money out, once you take a withdrawal. Now, if the account was funded with after-tax dollars, meaning it might have been a Roth 401k, which they're becoming more and more popular, but typically for people who are retiring right now, they didn't have access to Roth 401k, so they're just going to have the traditional 401k. In that case, again, any withdrawal will be subject to ordinary income tax upon distribution. So, again, if you take money out, I'm just going to make it an easy number. Let's say that you're in a 30% federal income tax bracket. So then that means that anything that you take out is going to be taxed at 30%. And in addition to that, if you take the money and take your withdrawal and cash it out before 59 and a half years old, the IRS hits you with an additional 10% penalty. So all in all, depending on your tax bracket, that additional tax can eat up as much as 40% of what you save. So again, 30% income tax plus a 10% penalty, that's like a 40% loan that you take on that money or a 40% fee that you're paying on that money. So again, like you said, Dean, if someone has $100,000 in a 401k and they decide to cash it out and they're under 59 and a half, the net amount that they're going to get in their hand is actually $60,000. They lose almost half of that due to taxes and penalties. So really, that's why rollovers play such an important part in helping you continue to accumulate money for retirement, because that way you can roll it over, you can take money, you can control your taxes, take it in different increments as opposed to taking it all at once. And it will just help you control your taxes a lot better and help your money continue to grow for you a lot better throughout your retirement.
Okay, so some of the options then, first of all, why do we choose to roll the money over into an IRA? There are a number of options here, but I want to talk about the one particular reason why you don't want to roll over your 401k or pension or 403b into an IRA. If you lose your job between the ages of 55 and 59 and a half, or if you retire between 55 and 59 and a half, first of all, good for you that you're able to do that. But what that does do is that is the only time that you have the ability to withdraw from that 401k if it stays with your employer, even though you cease employment. You leave there, you're retired or you lose your job. If you keep your money in that 401k and you are between the ages of 55 and 59 and a half, you can withdraw from that account and not get hit with the IRS 10% penalty for withdrawing prior to 59 and a half. Okay, that is really the only opportunity that we see that you're able to do that. So if you lose your job, you don't know how quickly you can replace your job, and you might need to supplement, unemployment compensation or anything else, you can withdraw from that account. Now, you will be paying taxes. Uncle Sam's always going to get that. You're going to be paying the taxes, but you won't have to pay that 10% penalty. So if you lose your job or retire, and go talk to a financial advisor and let them know that you're under 59 and a half years old and they're eager to recommend you roll over your 401k, you've got an issue there. You're probably working with an advisor who's not looking out for your best interest or didn't hear what you had to say. So either way, I would probably find a different advisor. So that's one option for keeping it there. But we're going to talk about some of the obvious options for wanting to roll it over into an IRA. Tyler, let's look at some of the obvious options there.
Yeah, Dean, so why choose a direct rollover to an IRA? Number one would be simplicity. So with that, typically when you roll over your 401k, 403b, 457 plan to an IRA, it's not too daunting or too hard of a process once you sit down with a financial advisor who knows what they're doing. You simply fill out forms authorizing your employer's plan to go ahead, cut the check, and then roll it over to an IRA account that you establish either on your own, with a financial advisor, whatever that might be. But usually it's just contacting the custodian, filling out some rollover forms, sending them in, they cut you the check, and then you go ahead and get that check to the new company that holds your IRA. And now I'm finding it more and more companies, they can do that right on the phone or right online. You can do that without having to sit on hold for a while and be mailed or emailed forms that you have to fill out and mail back and stuff like that. This is becoming very simple to do that. And again, if you're no longer employed and it's simple with your old employer and it's simple to simply fill out forms and get that money transferred over to your new IRA, many people are going to be more apt to do that because it's not as daunting of a process. So number one, simplicity. Number two, if you were to roll over your 401k to an IRA, you're going to have a much more expanded range of choices and investment options. Now, most employer-sponsored plans, they're limited with the number and type of investments that they offer. So, I've seen it where employer plans, you might have a 401k that has as little as 10 different options. Well, you take that money, and if you were to roll it into an IRA, you go from 10 different investment options to 10,000 different investment options. So, you might just have 10 different mutual funds that you can choose from within your 401k. Whereas if you go into an IRA, you can choose from 10,000 different mutual funds in addition to individual stocks, bonds, annuities. There's a bunch of different exchange traded funds, a bunch of different additional investments that you can go into if you were to roll that over into an IRA. And then you can maybe even split it. You have some in mutual funds, a different portion in annuities, a different portion in individual stocks. So really you can have a much more expanded range of choices if you were to roll it over. That's the second one. The third reason would be consolidation. There's a number of people that I see that they've changed jobs frequently, whether it just being going to a different job that offers more benefits, better pay, they just didn't like their old job for whatever reason, and they might have multiple retirement accounts scattered all over the place. They might have, I've seen it, there's been people who have 4, 5, 6 different 401ks, all from old employers. And as you get older, that's going to be very hard to keep track of, and you don't want to forget about those scattered all over the place because that's your hard-earned money that you saved over the years. But leaving funds, in multiple retirement accounts, it just increases your paperwork and record-keeping responsibility. It's more responsibility on your shoulders, and as you get, like I said earlier, as you get older, that's something that you don't want. So one thing you can do is you can take, all those 4, 5, 6 different old 401ks, roll them into one IRA, consolidate it, make it much easier for you to keep track of, especially as you age and get older and your memory may not be as clear. And then one of the last reasons to roll over your 401k to an IRA would be lower fees. Now, this might not always be the option depending on the investment route that you decide to go with your IRA, but oftentimes I see 401ks, they have different layered fees. They have internal mutual fund fees. They have fees for administrative and record-keeping services for the custodian to mail out all the statements and transaction confirmations, different things like that. Then they also have a TPA or a third-party administrator too that charges a fee, and they help with the different nuts and bolts of the plan, filing different plan documents for tax purposes, things like that. So oftentimes with 401ks and 403bs and different retirement plans through work, there are a lot of hidden layered fees that you could cut down on if you roll that over to an IRA. But keep in mind, that might not always be the case. There might be a financial advisor that recommends you go into a certain investment that has higher fees. So pay attention to fees, but lower fees could be a reason to roll over your 401k into an IRA.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here before we continue with 401k rollovers.
You're listening to Dean and Tyler Listle, investment advisors with Secure Retirement Solutions located on Allied Street in Green Bay. For a complimentary review of your current investments, or if you have questions, please call them at 920-347-9888 or go to their website at srsplans.com.
Okay, so once you decide to roll over your 401k, how much time do you have to actually get it into an investment? And then once you do get it into an investment, what type of IRA should you be looking at? Well, first of all, with a 401k rollover, you can have either a direct rollover or an indirect rollover. A direct rollover goes from custodian to custodian. So let's just say, as an example, your 401k through your company is held at Fidelity, and you want to roll over your 401k into an IRA that's held at something like TD Ameritrade. What typically happens is Fidelity will cut the check directly to TD Ameritrade, and then you can do your advisor or yourself can do the investing at that particular point. That is a direct rollover, custodian to custodian. If you do an indirect rollover, what that means is your money is being held through the 401k, let's say again as an example, Fidelity, and you retire or you lose your job, you want to do a rollover, and they cut the check and send it to you. That's an indirect rollover. There's a certain time limit you have. Tyler, what are the limits here on how quickly, and what are some of the penalties that happen if you don't move them in that time period?
Yeah, Dean, and this is something that many people don't know about. And in my experience, actually most companies do the indirect rollover, where if you no longer are employed by your old employer, you have an old 401k, you sit down, you roll it over, what happens is most times the company will cut the check to you, send it to your address of record, right to your mailbox, and then from there the responsibility falls on your shoulders, where you then have 60 days from the date of the check to reinvest it with another eligible retirement plan. So once you get that check, you have 60 days from that point to go and roll it over, reinvest it into your IRA that you have established already. But if you don't do that, then that check, that dollar amount, again, it's subject to ordinary income taxes. So then you're going to have to pay taxes on that full amount and an additional 10% federal tax penalty if you're younger than 59 and a half years old. So that's one thing that you don't want to forget about if you are planning on doing a rollover and that money is coming to you. It's an indirect rollover, which again, this is usually what happens is an indirect rollover. Then you have, again, 60 days from that date to make sure that you get that money to your new IRA. And if you don't, you have to pay ordinary income taxes plus a 10% penalty if you're under 59 and a half. No one wants to do that. So again, if that were to happen where you roll money out and you get that check, you don't want to sit on that for too long. You want to get it to your financial advisor, get it right to the new company right away so you don't even have to worry about that.
Okay, so you make the decision to roll over your 401k or your 403b or pension into an IRA. Now, there are a number of different IRAs, but when it comes to a rollover, really we look at two of them mainly as it relates to your retirement accounts, okay? And an IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account. So do understand that the investment you create with a 401k rollover is individual. It belongs to you personally. Individual retirement account. So there are a couple of them that we look at typically here. And Ty, the main two would be, traditional and Roth. Let's go through the traditional and the benefits of a traditional IRA, and then let's talk about a Roth and the benefits of the Roth.
Yeah, Dean. So again, if we tie it into rollovers, you roll over your traditional 401k portion, your 403b, 457 to a traditional IRA. Which is definitely the most common route to go. But now, like I said earlier, more and more employers are offering a Roth 401k portion. At that time, you'd have to roll that over to a Roth IRA. So it's got to be like to like. You can't take a 401k and roll it over into a Roth IRA, or vice versa. You can't take a Roth 401k and roll it over into a traditional IRA. It has to go like to like. But most common types of IRAs is going to be a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. First one, and probably the most common right now just because it's been around for longer, is the traditional IRA. And with that, taxpayers and their spouses who are younger than 70 and a half years old and have earned income can contribute to the account. But keep in mind, if you start up a Roth IRA, or if you have a 401k, you roll it over to a Roth IRA and want to add money to it, you can contribute to it. But when you do, you get a tax deduction when you contribute, depending on your income. And if you have an outside employer-sponsored plan, some of those deductions might be gone. But generally speaking, you get to deduct money when you contribute to your traditional IRA. But then the trade-off is when you take money out, it is then fully taxable. So it's really you get a tax deduction up front, but then you're taxed on the back end when you want to take money out. And again, if you take money out before 59 and a half, you have to pay a 10% penalty in addition to the ordinary income taxes on a traditional IRA. And then the other thing with traditional IRAs is that at age 70 and a half years old, not 70, not 71, but the year that you turn 70 and a half, you have to start taking what's called RMDs, required minimum distributions, from your traditional IRA. You have to start taking money out. So really with a traditional IRA, if you were to contribute, you get a tax deduction up front. It grows tax deferred, but then whenever you take a withdrawal, you have to pay taxes on that on the back end. Whereas with a Roth IRA allows you to make contributions with after-tax money. So when you contribute to a Roth IRA, you don't get that tax deduction up front, but then that money grows tax-free, and then when you take the money out, you don't have to pay taxes on the back end. So really, the main difference between a traditional and a Roth IRA is when you pay the taxes ultimately. A traditional IRA, you have to wait and you pay the taxes on the back end. With a Roth IRA, you pay the taxes up front because you contribute with after-tax dollars, and then on the back end, there is no taxes when you take money from there. The other thing with the Roth IRA is they're not subject to RMDs, required minimum distributions. So if you don't need the funds and you don't want to take money from it, a Roth IRA is definitely going to be more advantageous because you don't have to take any required minimum distributions, whereas with a traditional IRA you do. And then again, the contribution limits for both of them too, that's another thing that I don't want to forget here. Roth IRA and traditional IRA is both $5,500 if you're under 50 years old. However, if you're 50 or older, both of those limits jump up to $6,500 per year. But keep in mind, you can only contribute to one or another with that $6,500, or $5,500 if you're under 50 years old, or a little bit of each. So you can't contribute $6,500 to a traditional IRA and $6,500 to a Roth IRA in the same tax year. You have to do one or another. But really, when it comes down to the major differences before a traditional IRA, or with a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, the main one is when you pay the taxes. So again, traditional IRA, you pay the taxes on the back end. With a Roth IRA, you pay the taxes up front, and then it grows tax-free, and then any withdrawal that you take is non-taxable if you've had the account for at least 5 years and you're over 59 and a half. You don't have to pay taxes on anything that you put in or any of the gains.
So there's a couple things to take from that information. Always remember a Roth account has to be in place for at least 5 years. Or a Roth account needs to be in place 5 years or more, and you can start a separate one and keep it for a year or two. As long as one has been in place for 5 years, then you get the tax relief. And as far as contribution limits are concerned, Tyler explained you can contribute less to IRAs than you can a 401k. So always remember too, if you're at a stage in your life where you need to accumulate as much wealth as you possibly can before you retire, many times you're probably better served to just keep on plugging that 401k as heavy as you possibly can, because you can put $18,500 into a 401k if you're younger than 50 years old, or $24,500 if you're 50 years old or older. So, I mean, again, it all depends on what you're looking for. There's more flexibility, though, in the IRAs than a 401k typically. And if you shop around and meet with the correct financial advisors, you're probably going to have a cheaper option in an IRA than a 401k.
Yeah, Dean, good points there. And the last thing that I want to touch on when we talk about your traditional IRA versus a Roth IRA. So again, you have money in your 401k or Roth 401k and you roll that over. Or even if you want to start a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA outside of your current employer-sponsored plan, you can do that as well. But I often get the question, which one is better? And you can't answer that. There's not, one isn't better than the other. Generally speaking, it all depends on your financial situation. But to go along with that, typically if you're going to be in a lower tax bracket later, you might want to look at a traditional IRA. Whereas if you're going to be in a higher tax bracket later, you might want to look at a Roth IRA. And the other thing is, if you're younger, in your 20s, your 30s, you have a longer time that you need to work and tax rates may go up during that time. Typically a Roth IRA is going to suit you best over the long term, just because you're paying taxes on it now, you're contributing with after-tax dollars, but yet you have all these years for that money to compound and grow tax-free, and then when you start taking money out, you don't have to pay a penny of taxes on that within a Roth IRA. So I highly encourage a Roth IRA for a lot of younger investors, for a lot of younger retirement savers. But again, there's no right or wrong answer in terms of which one is better. It all depends on your individual savings and tax situation.
Okay, folks, that's all the time we have this week. See you later, and hope you'll join us again next week.
We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Secure Retirement Solutions with your hosts, Dean and Tyler Listle, fully licensed retirement specialists from Secure Retirement Solutions in Green Bay. To get more information from Dean and Tyler, contact them at Secure Retirement Solutions on Allied Street in Green Bay. Call 920-347-9888 or visit them at srsplans.com. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Brokers International Financial Services, LLC. Member SIPC. Brokers International Financial Services is not an affiliated company.